To be honest, there are probably some of you who are hearing about this country for the first time. Today I'm going to introduce a policy called Rwanda's National Transformation Strategy. As shown in this video, Rwanda's President Paul Kagame shares many similarities with Korea's President Park Chung-hee. Today, let's discuss Rwanda's National Transformation Strategy and President Paul Kagame. Many people aren't very familiar with Rwanda. So let's start by looking at where Rwanda is located. Rwanda is a small, landlocked country in the central eastern part of the African continent within the Great Lakes region. It is not adjacent to the sea, it's a mountainous region, so much so that it's called the Land of 1,000 Hills. Its size is smaller than Gyeongsang province, but it has a population of 14,904,683 people. Actually, you may have heard of Rwanda at least once. That's because Rwanda is the place where one of the most horrific civil wars in history, the Rwandan Civil War, took place. It's also famous because of the movie Hotel Rwanda. It is also known as the place where, from April to July 1994, in just 100 days, about 500,000 to 800,000 people were massacred in a great tragedy. Anyway, most people thought Rwanda would just remain an underdeveloped African country, suffering under dictatorship, like many others. Paul Kagame, who led the Rwandan Civil War, became the president of Rwanda in 2000. Paul Kagame began to change the country in a very reformative way. The beginning of this was the National Transformation Strategy. This National Transformation Strategy was Rwanda's national policy from 2017 to 2024. Now, Rwanda is implementing a new industrial policy, Vision 2050 first. Let's review the National Transformation Strategy. Simply put, the National Transformation Strategy mainly focuses on economic restructuring, industrialization, modernization, and building infrastructure. The most important part here is paving asphalt roads across the entire country. To us, these roads might just look like regular highways, but if you look at the previous condition, they were almost just dirt roads. But they completely rebuilt these dirt roads into asphalt roads. The total length was an impressive 800 kilometers. And they are building and maintaining 3,000 kilometers of feeder roads. And by creating international transportation and logistics companies, they are working hard to promote trade. Rwanda currently has no railways, but they're building them to improve logistics. Their efforts to enable logistics are visible. Of course, since Rwanda is a landlocked country, it can't build a large port like Busan Port in Korea, and there are some limitations when it comes to trade. You can see they're working hard to build ports on nearby large lakes and trade with neighboring countries however possible. Also, Rwanda has a unique characteristic, which is that Korea's Saemaul movement is being actively implemented here. Currently, Rwanda is actively introducing Saemaul studies into its educational curriculum and sharing know-how on how to locally apply the Saemaul movement, as well as Korea's development experience through the Saemaul movement. After establishing the Saemaul movement, Rwanda is now actively carrying out road-building campaigns in rural villages. President Paul Kagame aims to ensure logistics and distribution networks run smoothly even in Rwanda's smallest villages. They aim for industrialization. In Rwanda, about 70% of people work in agriculture, which makes up around 25% of GDP. As of 2022, 37% of Rwanda's export revenue comes from agricultural products, so agriculture cannot be ignored in Rwanda. As I said earlier, Rwanda's mountainous terrain limits productivity. Aside from coffee and tea, most agriculture is only self-sufficient. President Paul Kagame aims to transform Rwanda into an industrialized nation. Currently, secondary industry makes up about 22% of Rwanda's GDP. But this means they've reached a 10% growth rate over 2024. Rwanda's growth is fast, with manufacturing up 11% from 2024. The construction industry has grown by 12% compared to 2024. Although the manufacturing base is still weak, you can see that the manufacturing sector is growing quite rapidly. President Paul Kagame seems to be planning to link the rapidly growing manufacturing sector with infrastructure. They seek to boost industrialization with a 17% annual export growth target, aiming to make the country export-driven with high value-added products and services. President Paul Kagame is very interested in education. The 2023 national budget allocated 17% to education, highlighting his commitment. They aim to provide online lectures to every household in Rwanda by 2030. Perhaps because of this, the number of universities, which was only 1 in 1994, has increased to over 50 by 2024. The literacy rate, which was only 58% in 1991, has also increased to 73.2%. And Rwanda has shown quite an impressive response to COVID-19. Rwanda is a country with limited resources and a relatively less developed healthcare system. However, by conducting rapid testing and making the most of the healthcare system they have built up so far, Rwanda has become one of the countries with the lowest infection and death rates in the world. During the peak of COVID-19, Rwanda was the only African country whose residents could enter the EU for non-essential travel. Thanks to President Paul Kagame's National Transformation Strategy, Rwanda is now showing rapid economic development. From 2004 to 2019, Rwanda recorded an average annual economic growth rate of 7.8% for 16 years. Unlike other African countries where corruption is severe, the Rwandan government has a strong will to fight corruption, so Rwanda ranks at the top in Africa in terms of the Corruption Perceptions Index. As a result, public safety is also stable in Rwanda. Of course, when compared to Tanzania's GDP, that figure may seem quite small. Tanzania's GDP is $84 billion, while Rwanda's is $11 billion. Even comparing GDP per capita, Tanzania is at $1,326 and Rwanda at $989, so Rwanda has a long way to go. Still, most agree this is impressive. The reason for this is that Rwanda is a country located deep in East Africa, and since it doesn't have a coastline, it's a landlocked country where trade is difficult. And because Rwanda experienced a civil war where between 500,000 and 800,000 of its own people were massacred in just 100 days, everyone predicted that economic growth would be impossible. It's impressive that Rwanda has achieved economic growth despite these challenges. This national transformation strategy is similar to Korea's 5-year economic development plan. In fact, in a 2011 interview with the Donga Ilbo, President Paul Kagame said that he believed Rwanda could achieve results by following what Korea had done, and that he wanted to use Korea as a model to turn Rwanda into an IT powerhouse in Africa. At a 2015 United Nations conference, he credited Rwanda's rapid growth to adopting Korea's Saemaul movement, which is now being implemented in Rwanda. Of course, President Paul Kagame isn't only praised. Like President Park Chung-hee, he has both clear strengths and weaknesses. Currently, President Paul Kagame has held the presidency since 2000. In the most recent 2014 presidential election, he reportedly received over 99% of the votes. All opposition candidates got under 1%. He was also elected with over 90% of the votes in the 2003, 2010, and 2017 presidential elections. That's why I called him a dictator. Opposition figures face harsh oppression. In the 2014 presidential election, 2 strong critics of President Kagame were banned from running. Threats, illegal detentions, false charges, and even killings against the opposition and critical media are constant. In 2015, a constitutional amendment shortened the presidential term from 7 to 5 years and allowed one more re-election, letting him serve as president until 2034. And as for the Rwandan Patriotic Front, they are being criticized for monopolizing all of Rwanda's wealth. Crystal Ventures, founded in 2009 by Rwandan businessmen, holds assets of about 570 billion won. However, it is actually owned by the Rwandan Patriotic Front. It is actually known that President Paul Kagame himself owns it. Critics say Crystal Ventures controls Rwanda's wealth by expanding into infrastructure, real estate, and mobile businesses. He is working hard to rebuild Rwanda after the civil war and to advance national development and people's welfare. He prevented the ethnic conflict that led to the Rwandan Civil War, so his approval is high in Rwanda. Though seen as a dictator, he is viewed positively around the world. There are pros and cons, including typical dictatorship issues like corruption and human rights abuses. Currently, he is viewed positively because he prevented ethnic conflict and promoted economic growth. A considerable number of experts believe that Rwanda will develop into a fairly competitive country by 2050. Currently, under the Vision 2050 policy, Rwanda is vigorously pursuing economic growth with the goal of becoming an upper middle income country by 2035 and a high income country by 2050. However, there is a point where we need to pause and think. The question is, to what extent can this kind of national development be allowed? Economic growth and public security? The real question is, to what extent can democracy and human rights be put on hold for the sake of achievements like economic growth, public security, and eradicating corruption? In fact, Rwanda still receives very low ratings in terms of press freedom and political freedom. No one can say for sure whether a growth model created in a society where dissenting opinions are suppressed will be sustainable in the long run, or if it will lead to another kind of crisis. Just as Korea experienced great growing pains after its rapid development, Rwanda is also likely to reach a crossroads at some point. What do you think about Rwanda's national transformation strategy? Let us know in the comments. That's the end of the video. Thank you.